Detective Marcus Kane had seen enough crime scenes to know when something didn't add up. 23 years on the Baltimore force, the last 8 in homicide, and he developed an instinct for the unusual. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for what he found in the abandoned warehouse on Pier 47 that foggy October morning. The call came in at 6:47 a.m. Anonymous tip about suspicious activity, possible break-in. Kane arrived with his partner, Detective Lisa Morrow, expecting the usual, maybe some homeless folks seeking shelter or kids using the place for parties. Instead, they found Dr. Elena Vasquez. She was crouched over what appeared to be some kind of experimental equipment, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, safety goggles pushed up on her forehead. The warehouse floor was littered with strange metallic debris, and there was a smell in the air Kane couldn't identify, ozone mixed with something organic and unsettling. "Ma'am, you need to step away from that equipment," Kane called out, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon. Something about the scene felt wrong, dangerous in a way he couldn't articulate. Dr. Vasquez looked up, and Kane was struck by the intensity in her green eyes. There was fear there, but also determination. "Officer, you don't understand. I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez, xenobiologist with the University of Maryland. I've been tracking something for the past 6 months, and last night it finally made contact." Morrow exchanged a glance with Kane. They dealt with their share of unstable individuals, but Dr. Vasquez seemed lucid, professional. Her credentials, when they ran them, checked out completely. Published researcher, government clearance, the works. "What kind of contact?" Kane asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Dr. Vasquez gestured to the debris scattered around them. "Physical contact. This warehouse has been the site of several unexplained incidents over the past year. Missing persons reports, strange electromagnetic readings, witnesses reporting lights in the sky. I've been monitoring the location with specialized equipment." She led them to a bank of sophisticated-looking instruments Kane didn't recognize. Screens showed wavelengths and readings that meant nothing to him, but Dr. Vasquez interpreted them with the confidence of someone who'd spent years studying patterns others couldn't see. "At 3:22 a.m. this morning, my sensors detected a massive energy spike. By the time I arrived, there were signs of a struggle." She pointed to scorch marks on the concrete floor, arranged in a pattern that definitely wasn't random. Someone was taken. Kane's skepticism was warring with his professional instincts. The evidence was real: the burn marks, the equipment readings, the metallic debris that looked like nothing he'd ever seen. But the explanation Dr. Vasquez was suggesting challenged everything he thought he knew about the world. "Taken by who?" Morrow asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer. "Not who," What? Dr. Vasquez's voice was steady, but Kane could see her hands trembling slightly as she pulled up files on a tablet. I've been tracking a pattern of abductions across the eastern seaboard. Always the same signature electromagnetic disturbances, unusual metal fragments, witnesses reporting humanoid figures but wrong proportions, wrong movement patterns. She showed them photographs, documents, scientific readings. The data was compelling, organized with the thoroughness of someone who knew their career depended on being taken seriously. Kane found himself believing despite every instinct telling him this was impossible. The missing person from last night, do we have an identification? Kane asked. Dr. Vasquez nodded grimly. Jake Morrison, 34, works construction, lives about 6 blocks from here. According to my research, he fits the profile they seem to prefer: young adult males, physically fit, no extensive family ties. He was walking home from his night shift when they took him. Kane radioed for backup and put out a bolo for Jake Morrison, though he wasn't sure what good it would do if Dr. Vasquez's theory was correct. How do you search for someone who might not even be on the same planet anymore? Over the next several hours, as crime scene technicians processed the warehouse, Kane found himself drawn into Dr. Vasquez's world of impossible possibilities. She showed him correlation maps, tracking patterns that suggested organized activity, purposeful selection of targets. Whatever was happening, it wasn't random. The question, Dr. Vasquez said as they reviewed her data, is what they want with these people. Are they studying us, experimenting, or is there something more sinister? Kane didn't have an answer, but he was beginning to understand that Dr. Vasquez had dedicated her life to finding one. Her research was meticulous, her methodology sound. If she was right about even half of what she suspected, it changed everything. The breakthrough came when they found Jake Morrison's cell phone, dropped beside a shipping container at the far end of the warehouse. The last video he'd recorded was time-stamped 3:19 a.m., just minutes before Dr. Vasquez's equipment detected the energy spike. The footage was shaky, clearly shot in panic but unmistakable. A figure approached Jake from the shadows, tall, unnaturally thin, moving with a fluid grace that seemed wrong for anything with joints and bones. The lighting was poor, but Kane could make out details that made his stomach clench. Too many fingers, eyes that reflected light like an animal's, and something in its hand that looked like a weapon, sleek and purposeful. Last words human. The voice on the recording was layered, harmonized in a way that suggested multiple vocal cords or some kind of electronic modulation. Jake's response was barely audible, but Dr. Vasquez enhanced the audio. "Yeah, your grip is weak." The recording cut off there, but it was enough. Kane stared at the frozen final frame, Jake Morrison facing something that shouldn't exist, showing courage in the face of the impossible. "He's still alive," Dr. Vasquez said with conviction. That interaction, the way it spoke to him, this wasn't a killing. This was a taking. They have specific purposes for the people they select. Kane nodded slowly. In 23 years of police work, he'd learned to trust evidence over assumptions. The evidence here was clear, no matter how impossible it seemed. Jake Morrison had been abducted by something not human, and somehow, Kane was going to have to figure out how to get him back. As the day wore on and more specialists arrived at the scene, Kane realized his life had just taken a turn he never could have anticipated. Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent months preparing for this moment, tracking patterns and building understanding. Now she needed someone who could act on that knowledge, someone who could bridge the gap between scientific theory and real-world investigation. Looking at the determination in her eyes as she continued analyzing the evidence, Kane made a decision that would change everything. He was going to help her find Jake Morrison, no matter how far that search might take them from the world he thought he knew. The hunt was about to begin. The Joint Task Force briefing took place in a conference room that officially didn't exist, 3 floors beneath the Baltimore FBI field office. Kane had never seen so many federal agents in one place, along with military personnel whose uniforms bore no identifying marks. Dr. Vasquez sat at the head of the table, her research spread across multiple screens, addressing an audience that 6 months ago would have laughed her out of any serious scientific venue. "The pattern is accelerating," she explained, highlighting locations across a digital map of the eastern United States. 17 confirmed abductions in the past 8 weeks, all following the same signature. The electromagnetic disturbances are getting stronger, which suggests either improved technology or increased confidence in their operations. Agent Sarah Chen, the FBI's newly appointed liaison for what they were calling the Morrison investigation, leaned forward. "Dr. Vasquez, your research suggests these entities have been operating for months. Why are we only seeing escalation now?" Kane watched Dr. Vasquez carefully. Over the past week, as they'd worked together to piece together the larger pattern, he'd come to respect her analytical mind. She didn't make claims she couldn't support, and she didn't shy away from the implications of her own research. "I believe they've been conducting reconnaissance, learning our patterns, our weaknesses. The early abductions were careful, calculated people who wouldn't be missed immediately, taken from locations with minimal security or witnesses. But something has changed. They're becoming bolder." She pulled up the Morrison case file, along with 3 others from the past 2 weeks. These recent abductions show less concern for stealth. They're taking people from more populated areas, leaving more evidence. Either they don't care about being detected anymore, or they're running out of time for whatever they're planning. Colonel James Wright, the military representative, studied the tactical assessments Dr. Vasquez had prepared. What's your assessment of their capabilities? If we're looking at a potential rescue operation, we need to understand what we're facing. Dr. Vasquez exchanged a glance with Kane. They'd spent considerable time analyzing the physical evidence, trying to build a tactical profile of their adversaries. The conclusions were sobering. Based on the electromagnetic signatures and the physical evidence from abduction sites, they possess technology significantly beyond our current capabilities. Their transportation method doesn't rely on conventional propulsion, no heat signatures, no detectable exhaust. The weapons we've seen evidence of appear to be some form of directed energy, probably non-lethal for capture purposes. Kane added his perspective from the law enforcement angle. But they're not invulnerable. Jake Morrison's final recording suggests their physical forms have limitations. He noted weakness in grip strength, which implies these aren't just advanced humans. They're adapted for different gravitational or atmospheric conditions. Agent Chen pulled up satellite imagery from several abduction sites. We've been monitoring electromagnetic anomalies across the region. 3 locations show recurring signatures that match Dr. Vasquez's profile. If they're using consistent operational bases, we might have opportunities for surveillance or intervention. Dr. Vasquez nodded enthusiastically. That's exactly what I was hoping for. If we can predict where they'll operate next, we might be able to set up observation posts, maybe even attempt communication. Communication. Colonel Wright's tone was skeptical. Dr. Vasquez, these entities have been abducting our citizens. Why would we want to communicate rather than eliminate the threat? Kane had wondered the same thing, but Dr. Vasquez's research had convinced him there were larger implications at stake. Because we don't know why they're here, or what they want with the people they're taking. If Jake Morrison and the others are still alive, communication might be our only chance to get them back safely. The briefing continued for several hours, with various specialists contributing analysis from their fields. Linguists discussed the vocal patterns from Jake's recording. Military tacticians assessed potential intervention strategies. Medical experts theorized about alien physiology based on the limited physical evidence. Through it all, Kane found himself impressed by how quickly the impossible had become operational reality. A week ago, he was investigating what he thought might be a missing person case. Now, he was part of a multi-agency task force planning potential first contact with an extraterrestrial intelligence. Dr. Vasquez concluded the briefing with a proposal that surprised everyone. I want to make myself available as a potential target. The room erupted in objections, but she held up her hand for silence. Think about it logically. They've been selecting young adult males with specific physical and social profiles. But I'm the one person on Earth who's been actively tracking their operations. If they're intelligent enough to conduct systematic abductions, they're intelligent enough to know I'm a threat to their secrecy. Agent Chen shook her head. That's exactly why we can't use you as bait. If they perceive you as a threat, they're more likely to eliminate rather than capture. Not necessarily, Dr. Vasquez argued. Every interaction we've documented suggests they prefer capture to elimination. The question is whether they see me as a threat to be neutralized or a resource to be acquired. My knowledge of their operations could be valuable to them. Kane understood what she wasn't saying directly, that using herself as bait might be the fastest way to locate the missing abductees. It was a desperate plan, but their alternatives were limited. Traditional law enforcement methods weren't designed for adversaries who could appear and disappear without leaving conventional traces. Colonel Wright was studying tactical maps when his phone buzzed with an urgent message. He read it quickly, then looked up with grim expression. "We have a new development. Satellite surveillance detected a massive electromagnetic anomaly approximately 40 minutes ago, centered on a farm property in rural Virginia. The signature matches your profile, Dr. Vasquez, but it's exponentially stronger than anything we've recorded." Dr. Vasquez was already pulling up her monitoring equipment. "That's not an abduction signature. The energy levels are completely different. This is something new." Kane felt the familiar tightness in his chest that always accompanied major case developments. How new? The kind of new that changes everything we thought we understood about their capabilities, Dr. Vasquez replied, her fingers flying across her tablet as she analyzed the incoming data. "We need to get to that location immediately." Agent Chen was already coordinating logistics. "We'll have a tactical team ready to deploy within the hour. Dr. Vasquez, I need you to compile everything we might need for field analysis. Detective Kane, you're with the advance team." As the briefing dispersed into organized chaos, Kane found himself both terrified and energized. Whatever they found in Virginia would either bring them closer to rescuing Jake Morrison and the other abductees, or reveal that the situation was far more dangerous than any of them had imagined. Dr. Vasquez caught his arm as they prepared to leave. "Detective, I need you to understand something. What we're about to encounter, it's going to challenge everything you think you know about reality. Are you ready for that?" Kane thought about Jake Morrison, about the courage he'd shown in his final recorded moments, about the 17 other people who depended on them finding answers. "I've been ready since I saw that first piece of evidence you couldn't explain away. Let's go find our people." The helicopter touched down in a field 3 miles from the Virginia farmhouse just as the sun began to set. Kane had flown in military aircraft before, but never as part of an operation this classified. The tactical team consisted of 12 specialists from various agencies, all briefed on what they might encounter, but none fully prepared for the reality of potential extraterrestrial contact. Dr. Vasquez rode in the second helicopter with her portable analysis equipment. During the flight, she'd monitored the electromagnetic readings from the anomaly site, and her updates over the radio had grown increasingly urgent. Whatever was happening at the farm, it was unlike anything in her previous research. Energy levels are fluctuating in patterns that suggest active technology, she reported as they established a perimeter. But the signatures don't match any of the abduction events. This is something completely different. Kane found himself assigned to the Advanced Reconnaissance Team, along with Agent Chen and 2 military specialists. Their job was to assess the situation and determine whether the full tactical team should approach. As they moved through the darkening woods toward the farm, Kane's police instincts were screaming warnings. The farmhouse came into view through the trees, and Kane immediately understood why the electromagnetic readings were so unusual. The entire structure was surrounded by a faint blue luminescence, like some kind of energy field. But more unsettling were the figures moving around the property, too tall, too thin, moving with that same fluid grace they'd seen in Jake Morrison's recording. "Count at least 6 entities," Agent Chen whispered into her radio, confirming visual match with previous evidence. "They appear to be conducting some kind of operation around the farmhouse." Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled through their earpieces. "The energy patterns suggest they're powering something large. This isn't a simple abduction. They're operating some kind of facility." Kane studied the scene through binoculars, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The entities moved with purpose, carrying equipment he couldn't identify between the farmhouse and what appeared to be a large metallic structure that definitely hadn't been there when satellite imagery was taken the previous week. "There," one of the military specialists pointed toward a lower structure near the barn. "Human figures. They're moving under their own power." Kane adjusted his binoculars and felt his heart rate spike. The specialist was right. There were definitely human figures visible, apparently mobile but under some kind of escort or supervision. From this distance, he couldn't make out faces, but the clothing matched descriptions from several missing person reports. "We have visual confirmation of potential hostages," Kane reported. "They appear to be alive and mobile." Agent Chen was coordinating with the tactical team, but Kane could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Standard hostage rescue protocols weren't designed for situations involving non-human adversaries with unknown capabilities. How do you negotiate with entities whose motivations you can't begin to understand? Dr. Vasquez made the decision for them. I'm moving closer. I need to get readings from the equipment they're using. If we're going to attempt any kind of intervention, we need to understand their technology. Negative, Agent Chen responded immediately. Dr. Vasquez, you're not trained for tactical operations. Stay with the support team. But Kane could see Dr. Vasquez already moving through the trees, carrying a backpack full of monitoring equipment. Her scientific curiosity was overriding any sense of personal safety, and Kane realized someone needed to make sure she didn't get herself killed pursuing data. I'm going after her, he radioed to Agent Chen. Someone needs to keep the scientist alive. Kane moved through the woods with the stealth skills he'd learned during his brief military service 25 years earlier. Dr. Vasquez was surprisingly quiet for a civilian, but she was so focused on her instruments that she wasn't watching for potential threats. He caught up with her about 200 yards from the farmhouse perimeter. Dr. Vasquez, what the hell are you doing? She looked up from a handheld device covered with readouts he didn't recognize. Detective, the energy patterns I'm detecting, they're not just operating equipment. They're charging something. The electromagnetic field around that structure is building toward some kind of discharge. Kane felt cold dread settling in his stomach. What kind of discharge? I don't know, but the power levels suggest something catastrophic. If they're preparing to leave, they might be planning to eliminate all evidence of their presence here. Through the trees, Kane could see the human figures more clearly now. They were definitely the missing abductees. He could make out Jake Morrison's distinctive red jacket among them, but they seemed to be working alongside their captors, not imprisoned or restrained. They're not hostages, Kane realized. They're collaborating. Dr. Vasquez followed his gaze and nodded grimly. That's what I was afraid of. The abduction pattern, the careful selection criteria, they weren't taking prisoners. They were recruiting. Kane's radio crackled with Agent Chen's voice. All units, we have a problem. Satellite surveillance is detecting multiple energy signatures approaching this location. Whatever's happening here, it's about to get a lot bigger. Dr. Vasquez checked her equipment and her face went pale. Detective, we need to move. Now. The energy buildup is accelerating, and if my calculations are correct, we have maybe 15 minutes before something very bad happens. Kane grabbed her arm and started pulling her back toward the tree line, but froze when a voice called out from behind them. A familiar voice. Detective Kane. Dr. Vasquez, you need to stop running and listen to me. They turned to see Jake Morrison approaching through the trees, no longer wearing his red jacket but dressed in some kind of form-fitting material that seemed to shimmer in the fading light. His movement was different, more fluid, more controlled, but his voice was definitely his own. "Jake," Kane called out, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon. "Are you all right? We're here to get you out." Jake stopped about 20 feet away, holding his hands visible and non-threatening. "I'm fine, detective. Better than fine, actually. But you need to understand we're not prisoners here. We're partners." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding caution. "Partners in what?" Jake's expression was serious, urgent. "In saving both our species. Detective Dr. Vasquez, everything you think you know about what's happening here is wrong. They're not invaders. They're refugees." Kane's radio exploded with urgent chatter as the tactical team reported multiple contacts approaching their position. Whatever was about to happen, they were running out of time to understand it. Jake held up his hand, and Kane noticed something that made his blood run cold. Jake's fingers were longer than they should be, and there was definitely something wrong with the proportions of his hand. "The changes are necessary for survival," Jake explained, apparently noticing Kane's stare. "Their home world was destroyed by something they call the Devourers. They've been traveling for decades, looking for a compatible species to partner with. They chose us because we're similar enough biologically, but different enough culturally to offer new perspectives on survival." Dr. Vasquez was scanning Jake with one of her instruments, and Kane could see the readings were completely outside normal human parameters. "Jake, how long have you been changed?" "The process started the night I was taken. It's not painful and it's not irreversible if someone chooses not to continue. But Dr. Vasquez, Detective Kane, what they're offering us is incredible. Knowledge, technology, a chance to solve problems we didn't even know we could solve." Kane's radio crackled with Agent Chen's voice, tight with urgency. "All units, we have multiple bogies approaching from the south. Whatever you're doing out there, you need to extract now." Jake's expression turned desperate. "That's what I was trying to warn you about. The Devourers found them. Found us. If we don't work together right now, tonight, both our species are going to become extinct." Kane looked at Dr. Vasquez, saw the same impossible choice reflected in her eyes. Trust Jake Morrison, who was clearly no longer entirely human, or follow protocol and potentially doom everyone they were trying to save. In the distance, Kane could hear something that sounded like thunder, but rhythmic, purposeful. The sound of something very large approaching very fast. "Your choice, detective," Jake said quietly. "But you've got about 3 minutes to make it." Part 4. The sound grew louder as Kane weighed options that all seemed impossible. Through his earpiece, he could hear the tactical team reporting contacts that defied conventional description, massive objects moving without visible propulsion, energy readings that made Dr. Vasquez's equipment scream warnings. "Jake, I need you to explain what's coming," Kane said, making his decision. "Fast." Jake nodded, his transformed features showing relief. The Devourers are a hive-mind species that consumes entire worlds. They strip planets of all biological and technological resources, then move on. The people who took me, they call themselves the Wanderers, barely escaped their home world 3 years ago. Dr. Vasquez was frantically adjusting her equipment, trying to make sense of readings that were off every scale she designed. "How many Devourers are we talking about?" "3 ships, each one about the size of a city. They track wanderer settlements by following the electromagnetic signatures of their technology. That's why the energy levels around the farm have been building. The wanderers have been preparing defenses, but they need human cooperation to make them work." Kane's radio erupted with Agent Chen's voice. "All units, fall back to secondary positions. We have visual confirmation of 3 large objects approaching from the southeast. Repeat, all units fall back." Jake grabbed Kane's arm with his transformed hand, and Kane was startled by the strength in the grip. "Detective, the Wanderers chose specific humans for specific reasons. Military experience, technical knowledge, analytical thinking. They needed partners who could help them adapt their technology to Earth's conditions." "What kind of adaptation?" Dr. Vasquez asked, though Kane suspected she already knew the answer would change everything. "The kind that turns Earth into a fortress instead of just another world to be consumed," Jake replied. "The Wanderers have been running for decades, but they don't want to run anymore. They want to make a stand, and they chose Earth because humans are natural fighters." Kane looked toward the farmhouse, where the blue energy field was now pulsing in regular intervals. Through the glow, he could see both human and wanderer figures working frantically around the metallic structure, which was clearly some kind of defensive installation. "The transformation process," Kane said, studying Jake's altered appearance. "It's not just about survival, is it? It's about compatibility with their technology." Jake nodded. "Human nervous systems can interface with Wanderer technology, but only after certain biological modifications. The changes enhance reaction time, improve electromagnetic perception, increase physical durability. We become living components of their defensive systems." Dr. Vasquez was monitoring the approaching objects, and her face was grim. Energy signatures suggest massive destructive capability. If Jake is right about these Devourers, Conventional military response won't be sufficient. The thunderous sound was now accompanied by a low-frequency vibration that Kane could feel in his bones. Through the trees, he caught his first glimpse of the approaching vessels, dark shapes against the evening sky, moving with predatory grace. 30 seconds, Jake said urgently. The defensive grid will activate automatically when the devourers enter weapons range. If you're going to help, you need to get to the farmhouse now. If you're not, you need to be at least 5 miles away. Kane made eye contact with Dr. Vasquez, seeing the same desperate calculation in her expression. They could retreat and watch Earth's first interstellar war from a safe distance, or they could trust Jake Morrison and humanity's survival to an alliance with beings they'd met less than a week ago. Agent Chen, Kane radioed. This is Kane. Dr. Vasquez and I are proceeding to the primary structure. Whatever happens, maintain perimeter and observe. Agent Chen's response was immediate and predictable. Negative, detective. You are not authorized for direct contact. Kane switched off his radio and looked at Dr. Vasquez. Your call, Doctor. This is your area of expertise. Dr. Vasquez studied her instruments one final time, then shouldered her equipment pack. Jake, if we do this, if we join your defensive effort, what are our chances? Jake's transformed features showed grim determination. Better than if we try to face the devourers separately. The Wanderers have been preparing for this confrontation for 3 years. They have weapons, shields, tactical knowledge. But they need human intuition, human unpredictability. The sound of the approaching devourers was now overwhelming, and Kane could see lights moving in the sky, not the steady glow of aircraft, but pulsing, searching illumination that seemed to be scanning the landscape below. They're looking for the Wanderer settlement, Jake explained, starting to run toward the farmhouse. The electromagnetic signature is like a beacon to them. Once they lock on, we have maybe 10 minutes before they start the bombardment. Kane and Dr. Vasquez followed Jake through the trees, emerging into the open area around the farm buildings. Up close, the energy field was even more impressive, a dome of crackling blue energy that extended from the farmhouse to encompass several acres of the property. Other transformed humans were waiting for them at the energy barrier, and Kane recognized 2 faces from missing person reports. Maria Santos, a software engineer who disappeared 3 weeks ago, and David Chen, a Marine veteran taken from a parking garage in D.C. Detective Kane, Dr. Vasquez, Maria called out, her voice carrying new harmonics that suggested vocal cord modifications. We've been monitoring your investigation. Your analytical work gave us crucial intelligence about devourer approach patterns. David gestured toward the metallic structure, which Kane could now see was actually a complex array of interconnected devices. The defense grid requires human operators for optimal effectiveness. Our military training provides tactical frameworks their technology can amplify. Dr. Vasquez was scanning the transformed humans with her equipment, and Kane could see wonder replacing fear in her expression. The biological changes, they're not random, are they? They're specifically designed to enhance human capabilities that complement Wanderer technology. Jake nodded as he led them toward the central structure. Enhanced nervous system conductivity, improved electromagnetic sensitivity, increased physical resilience. We become living interfaces between human strategy and Wanderer defensive systems. Kane felt the energy field tingle against his skin as they passed through the barrier. Inside the dome, the air itself seemed to hum with potential, and he could see Wanderer beings working alongside their human partners in apparent harmony. One of the Wanderers approached them, moving with that characteristic fluid grace. This close, Kane could see that their apparent fragility was deceptive. The being's limbs were thin but clearly powerful, and its large eyes held an intelligence that was definitely not human but unmistakably aware. Detective Kane, Dr. Vasquez, the being spoke in that layered, harmonic voice. I am Navigator Zenth. Your species designation would be Commander or Coordinator. We offer you the same choice we offered Jake Morrison and the others, partnership in defense of both our peoples. Kane looked up at the approaching Devourer ships, now visible as massive dark shapes against the stars. What does partnership involve? Navigator Zenth gestured toward a section of the defensive array where several transformation chambers were arranged. Biological compatibility enhancement, followed by neural integration with our defensive network. The process requires consent and cannot be forced or reversed without significant preparation. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her scientific curiosity finally overcoming her caution. Navigator Zenth, I need to understand the stakes. If we refuse, if Earth's military attempts conventional defense, what are our chances? The Wanderer's large eyes showed what Kane interpreted as sadness. Based on our experience with 17 previous worlds, 0%. The Devourers have perfected techniques for overwhelming planetary defenses. Only partnership between species has ever achieved successful resistance. Kane felt the weight of decision settling on his shoulders. Trust an alien species with humanity's survival, or watch Earth become another consumed world. Neither choice offered guarantees, but one at least offered hope. Above them, the first Devourer vessel was beginning its descent, and Kane could see weapon ports opening along its hull like hungry mouths. Doctor, he said to Elena Vasquez, I think we're out of time for careful consideration. Dr. Vasquez stepped toward the transformation chamber without hesitation, her scientific mind apparently reaching the same conclusion Kane had arrived at through 23 years of police instincts. When facing an impossible situation, sometimes the least likely solution was the only viable option. "Navigator Zenth," she said, "I need to understand the transformation process. What biological changes are we talking about, and how will they affect human cognitive function?" The Wanderer commander moved to a control interface that looked like liquid metal formed into complex geometric patterns. The modifications enhance existing human capabilities rather than replacing them. Nervous system conductivity increases approximately 300%. Electromagnetic sensitivity improves to allow direct interface with our technology, and muscular density increases for improved durability under combat stress. Kane watched Jake Morrison, Maria Santos, and David Chen working at different stations throughout the defensive array. Their movements were more precise than normal humans, their coordination eerily perfect, but their personalities seemed intact. Jake caught his eye and nodded encouragingly. "The cognitive effects," Jake called out while his hands manipulated controls Kane couldn't identify, "are mostly positive. Enhanced pattern recognition, improved multitasking, better integration of sensory input. You're still you, detective, just more capable." Above them, the lead Devourer vessel had positioned itself directly over the farm, and Kane could see scanning beams sweeping across the energy dome. The defensive barrier was holding, but Navigator Zenth's expression suggested this was merely the preliminary phase of the attack. "Dr. Vasquez, Detective Kane," the Wanderer commander said urgently, "the Devourers have begun target analysis. We estimate 4 minutes before they commence primary bombardment. If you're going to join the defense network, the transformation must begin immediately." Kane looked at the chamber that would change him into something no longer entirely human, then at the massive alien ship preparing to destroy everything he'd spent his career protecting. The choice, when framed that way, wasn't really a choice at all. "Dr. Vasquez, you're the expert on impossible situations," he said. "What's your professional assessment?" She was already removing her equipment pack, preparing to enter the transformation chamber. "Detective, I've spent 6 months studying evidence that suggested everything I knew about reality was incomplete. The evidence now suggests our species faces extinction unless we accept help from allies we didn't know existed. From a scientific perspective, the risk-benefit analysis is clear." Kane nodded and moved toward the second transformation chamber. "Navigator Zenth, how long does the process take?" "Approximately 90 seconds for basic compatibility modifications. Full integration with the defensive network requires an additional 60 seconds. You will remain conscious throughout the process and can communicate with your partners. Kane settled into the chamber, which adjusted itself to his body dimensions with unsettling fluidity. "Jake, you still in there somewhere?" Jake's voice came from across the defensive array, carrying both humor and determination. "Still me, detective. Just me with better reflexes and the ability to interface directly with weapons systems that can actually hurt those things up there." The transformation began as a tingling sensation that spread from Kane's extremities toward his core. He could feel his nervous system adapting, his perception expanding to include electromagnetic frequencies he'd never been aware of. Through the enhanced sensitivity, he could suddenly sense the massive hostile presence of the Devourer ships, their destructive intent radiating like heat. Dr. Vasquez's voice came through the communication network, her scientific excitement clear even through the alien technology. "Kane, are you sensing the quantum resonance patterns? The Wanderer technology operates by manipulating fundamental forces at the subatomic level." Kane found that he could indeed sense things that had no names in human language. The defensive array wasn't just weapons and shields. It was a complex manipulation of space-time itself, creating protective distortions and offensive capabilities that worked by altering the basic laws of physics in targeted areas. "Transformation complete," Navigator Zenth announced. "Detective Kane, Dr. Vasquez, please proceed to integration stations 7 and 9. We will begin defensive operations in 30 seconds." Kane emerged from the chamber feeling fundamentally different but essentially himself. His vision now included spectra that revealed the true nature of the defensive installations, and he could sense the neural network connecting him to his human and wanderer partners. Dr. Vasquez took her position at a station covered with interfaces that responded to thought as much as touch. "Devourers beginning primary bombardment," Maria Santos reported from her position. Through the enhanced sensory network, Kane could feel the incoming attack like approaching thunder. The first energy blast struck the defensive dome with force that should have vaporized everything within a mile radius. Instead, the Wanderer shields absorbed the energy and redistributed it through a network of crystalline structures that converted destructive force into defensive power. "That's impossible," Dr. Vasquez breathed, then caught herself. "I mean, it violates conservation of energy as we understand it." Navigator Zenth's response carried what Kane interpreted as satisfaction. "Your species' understanding of energy conservation is based on incomplete observations. The Wanderers learned to access zero-point energy fields after our first encounters with Devourers. Defensive necessity drove innovation.